Welcome to the Developer Spotlight on the Full Dive Gaming Podcast. In the Developer Spotlight, we sit down with VR gaming developers, producers, writers, and we discuss their newest gaming titles. This week, we are sitting down with Eric Kleifield, Dan Clifton, and Nathan Frazier, producers, developers of the Atlas Mystery VR game that's currently available on App Lab. I want to say thank you, all of you, for coming on today.
Great. Yeah, no, thanks for having us. My name is Eric Kleifield. I'm the writer of Atlas Mystery. So I came up with the concept. I wrote the script for the narrative and designed all the puzzles. So yeah, I co-produced the game with Dan here and his company Top Right Corner. So good segue to you, Dan.
Yeah, my name is Dan Clifton. I own and run Top Right Corner, which I call an immersive content studio. We make original games like Atlas. We also do intense sort of training in the XR space for very large companies and some governmental organizations. And we also make education products in XR. So we do a bunch of different things that's kind of ever-changing. And we were very happy to work with Eric on Atlas.
Yeah, and I'm the lead developer. Vast majority of things you see in Atlas, I threw in there and put together.
That's awesome. Thank you, all of you, for coming on. While we're saying some thank yous, of course, we need to thank our sponsor, Asterion Products. If you don't know Asterion out there already from the podcast, they make high-quality VR and AR headset accessories. They've got their VR headset stand, the Aura. If you want to check it out, we've got links in the description, the show notes. And if you use code FULLDIVE10 on Amazon, you'll save an extra 10% on all their products.
So super thank you for sending the codes to try out the game. I actually finished the game last week, and I really, really loved it. One thing about the game is it gives you this just huge theater environment to sort of have this storyline unfold in, and has all these little pieces that all connect together in all little puzzle things. And sometimes an item from over here might actually give you a clue for over here. And I really loved that about the game. And the other thing that I really liked was because of all the good control options and all just how the pacing worked. What I actually did was I played the game with my girlfriend and I cast it to the TV and she would help me do the puzzles. I'd be like reading the things out and showing the things. And it just created one of these just extremely memorable experiences. And you know what? I had a really fun time playing through it. And I think ultimately just the environments were really cool. Puzzles weren't too challenging. It's just a really well-made game.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Thanks. Yeah, you're actually not the first person to tell us that they cast the game to the TV and like played it with like a partner or a friend or something. Like that's been a really popular way to play it. So it's great to hear.
Well, dang it. I did like the opposite. I was playing it and Nat had a tutorial up just in case.
Okay.
Just in case I got stuck somewhere. And then if I got stuck, I'd be like, hey. But for our listeners out there who don't know, they haven't heard of it, it's on App Lab. What is the Atlas Mystery?
Yeah, so the Atlas Mystery, we describe it as an escape room style puzzle game set in a 1940s era movie palace. So the kind of story around it is that years prior to the start of the game, the theater was the site of this kind of Hollywood tragedy where a director was murdered in the lobby by kind of like a known gangster of the time. And now, years later, you're assuming the role of this like newly hired employee who's kind of preparing the theater for this opening night under new ownership. So the game is all about kind of solving puzzles, unlocking kind of new areas of the theater, and then piecing together the events of what actually happened. So there's kind of this like murder mystery plot infused into the whole thing. We like to compare it to, and we've actually heard a lot of people kind of compare it to games like The Room, VR, Myst, I Expect You to Die, as far as like, you know, escape room style puzzles. And there's kind of this cool element of like, I'm a big fan of like old Resident Evil games and that kind of thing, where there's a lot of like object scavenging and like, you know, finding documents and kind of things that alluded to this larger story. So we infused a lot of that in there, where the narrative isn't necessarily like directly presented to you. It's a lot of like the more that you kind of search and uncover, the more you kind of figure out about the plot. And yeah, we've actually had a lot of people describe like going through the game again and kind of like, you know, discovering more things about the story that they didn't really, you know, uncover before. So yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. The game has this perfect balance where you can sort of combine the teleport with the just regular movement, and you can even click in the stick for like fast movement. And for me, like it made the game so much easier to play. How'd you come up with this to do it this way?
That was Nathan's stroke of genius. So
good to Nathan.
Yeah. Honestly, it's one of those things where every VR game has different controls. And it's so frustrating when you get into a game and they're like, okay, this game you can only teleport, this game you can only move, this game, you can't do X, Y, or Z. And I was kind of like, what if we just had all the options available at all times? Which for me is great because, as some players do in VR, you might get nauseous if you're moving around too much. And so for me, and I think if Eric does the same thing when they play, is for large distances we teleport. For small distances, we kind of just move the stick. So we get that fine control of locomotion while also, kind of cutting back on the long parts of just moving forward for a long period of time through teleporting. And some players might only teleport, some players might only locomotion. But just having all the options there just hopefully becomes the standard, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's really wise. And you actually hit something earlier that I was really curious about. You said it was like an escape room puzzler. And of course, in the Oculus store, you only have so many terms you're allowed to define the game with, puzzler being, or puzzle game being one of them. But more in the reviews, people kept saying escape room, escape room, escape room. Was that something you were going for? And do you think that maybe we should have a game genre that is considered escape room and not necessarily always just have to classify them as puzzler?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think so.
I would say so too. And I think on SideQuest, I know they do have a very specific escape category in addition to puzzle category, which is kind of cool because we kind of fit in both there. But yeah, I mean, early on we were kind of hesitant to just call it a straight up escape room because it's escape room kind of has a connotation to it that's one single room that you want to get out of with multiple levels that you might be able to select. And usually there's a 60-minute time limit. And this was meant to be a much bigger experience where there's no, it's all just a linear game. There's no real level aspect to it. And, there's kind of more of a exploratory element to it than a typical escape room game. But, I call it an escape room game all the time. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to go back a little bit, Eric and I met. We have a film background. We also own a film studio together that we work with, and so we actually met when Eric was working at Blumhouse, and I made a movie. To cut a long story short, we convinced Blumhouse in the marketing department that Eric worked in to allow us to make a VR game, and that was very much in the infancy of VR. That was at a party in November of 2016. The movie and the game came out in 2017, so that was right when sort of early Vive was out and everything else. And that was an escape room game called Belko VR, which was really sort of the first foray that I had into non-360 video VR, which I was creating content with and got out of that pretty quickly. And so I think in terms of Top Right Corner's DNA and getting into VR, I think the escape room kind of genre is something that we definitely wanted to piggyback on. And although this isn't a turn-based or level-based escape room, I Expect You to Die, you mentioned how you can walk through pretty much the entire lobby, and obviously there's different levels that you kind of get into with the elevator, but it is different than those games. But we just found that even there's no real genre that completely defines it, I guess we just thought that escape room puzzler is the best we could come up with.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a great point about Belko, because really the conversation for Atlas came out of Dan and I talking over a year ago about that was such a great experience. We still see even to this day people picking up that game and downloading it. It's still pretty popular on Steam. So it was created to promote a movie. It was a 15-minute kind of demo experience of sorts, but really impressive and just really well done. So we were kind of talking and just brainstorming about how cool would it be to do something that's a much bigger experience, multi-hour kind of puzzle escape room kind of thing. And yeah, it just so happened that Dan's schedule with Top Right Corner and everything, there was just kind of the perfect window to be able to jump into this really quickly.
So you mentioned that the other one you guys worked on, the movie one, was about 15 minutes long, and this game, the Atlas Mystery, is about 2 to 3 hours. Do you kind of feel like that's the sweet spot for this kind of genre, or were you kind of hoping to make it longer or even add a conclusion, a part 2 or something?
Yeah, good question. I do find that to be for kind of single player puzzle narrative experiences. I do find that to be kind of the sweet spot personally. I mean, we would love to expand the game in certain ways. We've definitely talked about avenues that we would take to do some DLC and other things. So yeah, I mean, I look back at kind of the other games that are available on Quest, and our idea was to release this game, but at a price point that was more accessible, where people, a lot more people could be able to play it, and that once you get up to kind of like that $30 price range, it starts to get a little tricky to justify games of this length. But we felt really good about where we're able to end up, and I think people have felt pretty satisfied about kind of where game length and all that, and bang for their buck.
Lots of doors still. You guys could add anything you wanted to as well in the theater.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes down to whether or not you're going to have a longer campaign. And I think from a campaign single player mode, I think the 2 to 3 hours, some people breeze through it in an hour and a half, the speed runners, and some people take 6 or 7, right? But I think from a campaign perspective for this kind of game, it's in a sweet spot. But I think that if we add procedurally generated sort of DLC or something else, it kind of comes down to replayability and kind of balancing what those other factors are and how that fits into the genre of game that we've already set up. Whether you're setting up a different part of the mystery, if it's other background. There was ideas of having you actually witness part of the murder, or being able to even affect it in different ways, because the game does get a little bit ethereal towards the end. But all those were a bit sacrificed because of time, money, and budget. So there are avenues that we'd like to take it, but a lot of that speaks to some of the App Lab versus main store and all the other things I'm sure we'll get to later in this podcast.
True.
Yeah.
True. I really had a good time with the game. Something that I did want to point out, for a puzzler game, this doesn't hold your hand. Other games, some games employ a mechanic where, like, if you don't figure out the puzzle in 2 minutes, the character talks himself and it's like, oh, I really should go look at blah, blah, blah. And this does not seem to do that at all. So how did you balance difficulty and enjoyability in the puzzles in the game for people who are new to puzzlers or people who are very used to them?
Yeah, no, it was tricky, and it took a lot of just experimentation. But yeah, like, we had that mechanic, I think, in Belko, where if you were stuck on a puzzle for more than like 90 seconds or 2 minutes, then you'd have like your character start saying some lines. A lot of people really liked that, and a lot of people, kind of were like, "Oh man, I wanted to figure that out on my own. Like, I was almost there." So you kind of do have to find that balance. Like, we talked about a hint system, but it ended up just not really being necessary, honestly, in all of our playthrough and kind of early testing and all that. And yeah, like it just took a lot of experimentation. Fortunately, like, because of Top Right Corner, we had kind of a lot of people that were on other projects who weren't really as steeped in this game. So anytime we were kind of questioning whether a certain puzzle was too difficult or was too easy, we can kind of add them to the game and kind of throw them into it and just kind of see their initial reaction. And yeah, we were just really open to feedback. Like, during the kind of initial alpha test, there were certain puzzles that we just kind of completely rethought, because we just saw repeatedly people were getting stuck on them. Even post-release, there was one specific hint that we added into a certain puzzle that we saw, during our initial like 24 hours. There were just a little, like, few too many people getting stuck on it. So we tweaked it by adding another element into the game to kind of help, bridge that.
Was it the candy bars?
Logic. It was the candy bars, yeah.
That was my question too. We'll keep it spoiler free. We're not going to talk about any of the solutions of the puzzles, but that
Nice.
one was probably one of the hardest puzzles. And I felt like later on, if that puzzle had been later, I kind of started like, okay, this is kind of how the puzzles work. I started to get it more. I
Yeah.
probably would have, but I did have to look something up on that one, because it was like after, 5 minutes or so trying to figure out, I was like, okay, I'm missing something here.
Mhm.
And I had to look it up.
Weeds you out early.
That's the make or break point for the game for everybody.
Well, yeah, there's something to say about that, though. I think, it is the puzzle. It's probably the one puzzle, and not to give anything away, but if you don't get the core logic of how that sort of puzzle group fits together in that area, you can go down the wrong path for 5 or 10 minutes if you don't get the core logic of what's happening, or the other clues that the other puzzles in that group give you to kind of clue you into what you're looking for in the candy bars.
Mhm.
And it is tough. And I think with the candy bar puzzle, it's sort of a thing where that is about half an hour into the game, and there's something to be said about ramping up. Nathan, you probably have thoughts on this too, but like ramping up and having that, like, having the puzzles get incrementally more difficult, but it was almost nice to have something difficult happen 30 or 40 minutes in to almost allow people to kind of get over a hump. So I kind of go back and forth on what's the perfect place for something of that difficulty.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that one in particular was one that we honestly had no idea how hard that was going to be. Like because when you see the design document and you're like, okay, that makes sense. I understand like the logical steps of that. And so it seems pretty simple when you already know the solution. And we just watched some streamers play it and stuff, and we're like, oh, like none of them are making this connection that we thought was like, going to be very simple. And so we're like, okay, let's go back. Let's add like at least a little bit of a hint, and kind of make things a little bit more obvious. And we still know it's going to be kind of challenging, but it does kind of help that like, okay, this type of game, you're going to have to look at everything. Like you're not just going to be like, okay, what can I interact with? This must be it. You're going to have to kind of look at everything to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It almost forces that perspective on things. Whereas I think that it's almost good to have something, you get out of the tutorial space. There's a bunch of different puzzles before that, maybe 3 or 4, but it kind of forces you at that point to really consider all the different options and to truly look at every single piece to try and figure out what the logic of that is. And so it is almost good having that early, because then after that puzzle, you go into this large lobby area where there's tons of puzzles and some interact with each other, some are siloed. And so we just thought that was a good way to really kind of almost like force, maybe weed out people who couldn't do it, but really force people to kind of up their game at that point.
Yeah, and then very diehard escape room fans always tell me that the candy bar was their favorite puzzle. So I'm like,
when
wow,
you reach
really?
the solution, it makes sense. Like it's like when you see the solution, you're like, oh, this is so obvious. Why didn't I see this?
Mm-hmm.
But just getting to that one part because you're just, I don't know. I kept thinking that the 5 cents on it meant the Roman numeral 5, and I'm like, why isn't this working?
Right, yeah. No, it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, designing like I just think that escape rooms work so well in VR. Like the medium is just like perfect for that kind of thing. When you do a real life escape room, you can ask for a hint pretty much at any point, and there's an employee there to kind of like usually give you like a themed hint or something. So it's just you just have to approach it differently, and you have to like design puzzles kind of in a slightly different way. That just kind of, you really have to, because I've done real life escape rooms that are just like, there are certain things where I'm like, oh my god, like that was such a logical leap, like that was really pushing it. And this, you just have to really pinpoint and be like very precise about that kind of stuff.
So speaking on a more like design element, the game has this backpack you can pull out of the back of your shoulder, and I've had the same kind of backpack as in The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. But the first time I ever played with this kind of backpack was they had like a chest version of it in Shadow Legend VR. Where was the inspiration to add that into the game?
Yeah, I think that was Nathan's suggestion, right? I think you
we need an inventory system. This is not going to work.
Yeah. Eric designed everything, but as I was like creating it, I quickly realized there's a lot of pieces to some of these puzzles, and stuff. And sometimes you feel like, I don't want to, you have 2 hands, you can hold 2 things, and stuff. So it's like, if there's a piece of a puzzle that requires 4 things, you don't want to have to go back and make multiple trips. Definitely with how big this theater is, making multiple trips will always feel a little bad. Definitely when it's not like a fun going back. Like you might go back and be like, oh, now I know how to solve this. That's like a fun going back. But going back just because you have to get items and you can only carry 2 at a time is not fun. So it was actually pretty like maybe like halfway into development that we're like, we need an inventory system. And yeah, this is just kind of one I've seen before. It's one that works. It's one that doesn't require a crazy amount of tutorialization, because we wanted to keep our tutorial very simple. We didn't want to have to like go through a huge tutorial where we spoon feed you tons and tons of info. So we're like, okay, what's a very understandable tutorial? Backpack, you put stuff in it, you take stuff out. You don't need to like mess with any menus. It's just very kinetic in that way. And yeah, it worked for what we needed it to do.
Yeah, one thing that surprised us too is like, we actually designed blueprints for pretty much the entire theater. So, early on, before we really even built anything, we had kind of like the entire layout of all the different rooms and how they connected and like spatially where they would align and all that. which changed a little bit, during development. But we pretty much had the core idea of like where everything was going to go. And then, we start building it. And then once you actually get into the environment in VR, you're just like, this is huge. Like this theater is massive. And you just like underestimate just like the amount of kind of traveling around that you're going to do. And, it's kind of typical just development design stuff. But yeah, it was really just like finding that mechanic that kind of helped, just ease gameplay a little bit.
The other thing I noticed too was that if you, for the elevator, for example, you couldn't take items that were in your hand from downstairs to upstairs on the elevator. They seemed to like disappear. So if you didn't have the backpack, you wouldn't be able to transfer some of those items anyway. Was that part of the choice in the backpack too, or did you guys just sort of just bonus?
Yeah, like the object kind of saving system for everything was probably the biggest hurdle to have to figure out in this game, because there's so many objects. You have kind of free reign of going to all these places. So there is like, I think, a surprising amount of just like back end hand holding with the game that you might not even really expect, because there is kind of an element of like, if there's a paper that you don't realize is important to a puzzle, and then you decide to like take it all the way to the other end of the theater, drop it, forget about it, you go back to the room. Are you going to even remember that paper? So there's certain like subtle elements that kind of kick in every once in a while to just kind of like nudge you in the right direction. And
it's
a
funny
lot
you
of
mention
that,
because there was one instance I had that there was an item that I had that put on my face. I'm not going to say what the item is because I don't want to spoil anything.
Mhm.
But I guess I opened the backpack to put it away at the same time it was close to my face, which it just seemed to disappear. But I just went to the main menu and right back into the game, and there it is back in my inventory. Took like 5 seconds. There was no issue at all. And the checkpoint system is just amazing in the game for doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot of just trial and error on Nathan's part. And just
thank you. It is that thing that is like it like seems so simple on paper, but that is kind of not that it's easy to make anything like look good and have it be fun in VR, but those kind of back end things are really where you spend most of your time, especially towards the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, getting all that to work was a pain. And we definitely designed it in such a way where, with escape room type games, it's so important that nothing breaks. And if you do have something that breaks, you need a way to reset it, and stuff. Because sometimes definitely with VR, because of the nature of it, where you can move your hands and try to like glitch yourself through a wall more easy than a normal game, we had to put some sort of system in where it's like, okay, what's a fail safe where if the player does something that we didn't expect and something, a piece is missing, we know that they can always, quit out to the main menu, come back, and that'll fix everything. Like that'll make sure that they have everything they need, that anything that they threw outside the map somehow due to some crazy, physics thing, that's now back in their inventory, that they're now placed back inside the map if they glitched out the map. Like we wanted to make sure that you never were in a place where like, oh, well, I can't finish the game anymore. And
like that. If you somehow catapult yourself out of the map while holding the backpack, while grabbing an item and throw it, like there are things that you can do at the same time, that there's always going to be something that you can't predict. And until you can test it so thoroughly, and then you watch a streamer on day of release have it come out, and people will always do something that's you're like, I never thought of that. But it's all you can do really to try to especially in VR, because of some of the glitchy nature of certain things. So we tried to think of all those things, and I'm just glad that the checkpoint system, I'm glad that internal logic and what we did on the back end, really made the gameplay and experience a good one for you guys.
Yeah, it got crazy. I mean, like even during, we spent many long nights just in the headset, just trying to break the game, just trying to do as many crazy things, because we just know that like, players are going to do just unpredictable things. And, it got to the point where we were like, if you're able to somehow get through a wall, then you're skipping like 30 minutes to an hour of the game, which is just, like can't have that happen. So we'd be like, okay, like let's say like the player stood up against the wall, and then let's say they moved out of like the boundaries of their, Oculus Guardian, teleported all over the place. Like, are they going to actually be able to get out of the wall? Like, we just had to account for even, things that like are, kind of like outside the scope of the hardware too. So little things like that.
You reset your Guardian and you saved it at a certain point, reset your Guardian, came back. And then would you be in a different place? Could you glitch through a wall? I mean, these are all fun parts of VR development.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, something that other people don't have to deal with in regular development. You're kind of touching on it now, but I was curious. I mean, you have a whole team we're seeing here. What does it take to bring a game like this to the market? How much time? How much development? What's the cycle like?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as Eric said, not everyone in Top Right Corner worked on this. We have a team now of it's grown to almost 12 now of different people, which is
Oh,
kind of
wow.
insane. It's oddly legitimate. We're getting there, but as I said, we work on a bunch of different things, and I think when this had started, we definitely had less people because we started in like mid-July of last year, and I give Eric. Really all the credit for essentially taking a month and a bit to finish that game design document. You had that version in July and August of last year.
Yeah.
We worked through a bunch of different things, and then we didn't really start a lot of core development until late August of last year. We did have our art director, Andre, start to break up the models that we'd have to create versus purchase. And pretty much everything actually was created from scratch. There's a few key things that were turbo squidded and then completely optimized, but it was pretty few and far between. Pretty much everything was made from scratch to be optimized for Quest, which again, we'll get to. But in terms of the timeline, I think, Nathan, you started really in late August, early September. And, with holidays, in December and everything else, it really almost was a 6.5, 7 month max timeline because we were still doing some fixes in April. We put it out April 13th, but really it was September sort of through September through late March with some time off. So really like 6.5 months, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
So with that being said, obviously you guys have dropped 5 patches already to fix, whatever things are going on. Do you see this being a project you're going to keep working on to continue adding more things, or what's the future with this?
Yeah. Some of that was just to fix like typical, release day, kind of like hotfix stuff that you just, pop up kind of once you push it out wide and see all the different hardware combinations and everything. And then, we immediately wanted to support it in other ways too. Like we did achievements. We added achievements across all platforms. So, Oculus, Steam, Viveport. And some things were just minor fixes like wanting to add, or minor additions, I should say, like wanting to add like audio controls. We found that like a lot of streamers and a lot of content creators wanted the ability to like turn off music, but keep, objects like interaction noises and all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of that, and just kind of addressing, making it as like kind of friendly, user friendly as possible in that way. But it's something that we want to keep working on for sure, and just improving in certain ways. Like I mentioned, would love to be able to do some DLC. And there were actually certain rooms that we had to cut completely. So there were other environments in the theater, and there was actually one kind of major environment that would have been really, really fun. And there's kind of like built-in puzzle potential in it. That's like another theater environment we just weren't able to do and had to cut a little bit. So if we get the opportunity to expand it, I would absolutely just like go there first. And then we have some other kind of like crazy, like kind of like leaning more into like supernatural kind of trippy versions of like where we'd want to take it to. But all of it is playing into this like larger, narrative of the murder.
Yeah. And I think that with this initial release, we designed this to be released on Quest 2. So we put a ton of effort into optimization and to getting it there on Quest 2. It's not that the PC VR version was an afterthought. It's just that we knew that we could do that based on our previous releases and our previous experience. So the PC VR version is a lot more forgiving because of the resources that are available for that, where the Quest is a cheap phone strapped to your head, and it's a miracle that it works as well as it does. So much effort went into making the Quest 2 version work that a lot of the hot fixes that came out were very much in the vein of, wait, why does this not work on Valve, on the index that's being used with Viveport? Or why does this not work on this specific thing that was a little bit outside of our control from a hardware perspective, and then was also some low-hanging fruit. But I think a lot of the hot fixes have actually predominantly affected some of the Steam VR components versus, because you can't control for hardware and you can't control for device with that. So a lot of times there was odd permutations of hardware and device that necessitated those hot fixes. Whereas I think the Quest, for the most part, has actually been pretty down the middle, because we tested it so much, and because you can control for hardware with the Quest. I don't know, Nathan, if you want to speak to some of those changes.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a lot of fixes, and we hope to do, more stuff as time goes on. Like Eric, kind of mentioned, some expansions that we had planned, and some stuff that I've even built out a decent bit of it already, but we just didn't have, the time to kind of add all that in and make it as polished as the rest of it. And yeah, no, to me, I think, one of the funniest things that took us so long to fix was the fact that, with the European thing that we kind of figured out is that, a lot of people in Europe, their number system, they use commas for decimal points instead of periods, which I'm not sure if everyone knows. But that caused like a huge loading bug where like European players were like spawning way outside the map due to the, their different numbering system, and us just completely going over our heads that would be like a thing. And that was like in our latest, the last patch we put in, because for a while we were like, this makes no sense. And players, when they report bugs, they don't report, hey, I'm from this country. So it was kind of hard to narrow down like what is causing certain players to have this random bug that none of us can reproduce here.
Yeah.
And then we figured it out, and it was...
Yeah, for a while, the only negative reviews we had on Steam were only German and French people that kept complaining how buggy the game was. And I think still
We're
now,
so confused.
pretty much like the only negative reviews we have are that. And we were like, hey, we fixed it. Please change it. But
yeah, we came up with some like insane workarounds for that too, which really clever, Nathan, but like having the game detect if someone moved like X amount from a certain location and then teleporting them back, and little workarounds like that. But yeah, that was one of those things where once Nathan brought it up, it was just like, oh man, game development.
That's so interesting. Sometimes it's like, okay, don't go back and rebuild the system. Just find a new fix to work around the bug. You talked about there, you're on Steam, so PC VR can get this. You're on Quest 2, but it's technically through App Lab, which I'm not familiar with really what it takes to get on App Lab. I'm guessing that most developers, the like main end goal is to get on the main Quest store. Do you want to kind of walk us through what does it mean to be on App Lab versus the Quest store? What does it take to make the jump?
Yeah, so we don't know actually what it takes to make the jump from App Lab to main store, because Meta refuses to publicize that. But I think, mainly like App Lab, unfortunately, is sort of the AAA affiliate. It is sort of the minor leagues. But, really for getting on, there's 15 million Oculus 2 headsets that are on the market, apparently, and which is pretty crazy. How much they're actually used and how many people actually use them is a different question. But it is the main, if you want to make money and you want to keep developing, like you need to be on that platform. So App Lab is essentially a way where developers can submit to get their game on something that people can access somewhat publicly on a Quest 2. And it really came out of sort of the side quest movement, which was you had to be submitted to get on the Oculus Quest store. And then the side quest was sort of that kind of homebrew side loading technique. And then Meta sort of threw developers a bone in their eyes to get onto App Lab. But I think one of the misconceptions about it is, first of all, if you search for our game on the main store, or just in general, it is incredibly hard to find because you actually have to scroll through all these other games. If you search for Atlas Mystery, you will find it, but you have to scroll all the way down and pass several like big warning signs that says you are leaving meta territory. Like the map ends, there be dragons. You go cross all of that, and it says these games are not tested. We don't know. But what's so insidious about it is that when you search for our game, it actually gives you all these other main store puzzle and escape room games. It'll list those first before you get to ours. So, the other misconception is that Meta makes you believe that games are not tested before they go onto App Lab, which is actually not true at all. Like it took us 2 months of testing, frame rate, polish. There's actually quite an extensive testing process that we had to go through in terms of optimization, especially with art and frame rate, even to get onto App Lab. And there's certain games that are on the main store that completely fail that in general. So I think, our biggest gripe right now with Meta, and we could evangelize on that for hours, but is that there's really no consistency of the quality of games that are on the main store, and then you have a game like ours on App Lab that no one can even find, and even Eric, you can speak to that a little bit too about people who can't even find it.
Yeah, and like I've lost count of the number of times that we've done like even on other podcasts and reviews and just like correspondences that I've had with players is they're always asking like, oh, why isn't the game in the main store? And we just kind of have to be like, I don't know.
We don't know.
It's not a very transparent system. But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest issues is that I get almost every day now DMs from like on my Oculus account from players who are just people who are interested in the game or just have seen stuff that we posted online on Reddit and all that kind of stuff, and just say like I don't know where your game is, like I can't find it. Is it on the store? Like how do I get it? And it's I have like now just like a copy paste block of text that's just like type the Atlas Mystery into the Oculus Store, scroll to the bottom, click through the App Lab button, ignore the warning sign. And there's the store page. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, we're lucky that we have like SideQuest is still a very very active community, and they've been very supportive of the game, and we've gotten a lot of people just discovering the game through that platform, which has been nice. But yeah, it's definitely like it's tough because there's just so much stuff out there. There's so much competition and all that. So just adding those like extra layers of difficulty just to like finding and accessing a game is just it can make all the difference, and it's been tough to work through.
I know we sound like bitter developers too, but I think that it's really because of the hypocrisy of I've spoken with people at Meta, and they're like, no, App Lab is a great place for people to find games, and it's a great like testing ground for. And I tell them, I'm worried about like if that's your philosophy, given how out of touch it is with reality, I'm a little worried about Meta's future in general. Because Apple's just going to destroy them with that kind of line of thinking, which is probably going to happen anyway. But it's so insane how we're not incentivized at all as developers to add stuff to the game. I wish we could say, yes, we're going to roll out all these things. We have made money off of this game. People are playing it. But because so we've grossed money. We've not. But we have a way we have a way of selling the game. The thing is, because there's no transparency at all about reaching people, and people on a main store, people can't even find the game. We're not incentivized as developers to make more quality content because we have no path forward and have no idea. So what are we going to do? Just keep spending money to expand a game that we can't get to people? It's not a good proposition.
Well, don't worry, you're not at risk of sounding like bitter developers. You're talking to two YouTubers here, so the lack of transparency in what we do is something we understand. Lip, I think you had another question for him.
Well, the thing is that I remember when Warplanes hit the official Oculus store, and they basically said, okay, this is what it takes. 200 5-star reviews is what it takes apparently to get onto that point. But I've seen like there's a game that was released on PlayStation VR and PC VR, sold immensely well. I think it's one of the top 10 best-selling PSVR games, and it's coming to App Lab. Oculus did not approve it for the Oculus store, and that's Swordsman. But it seems like they are just so strict, and they just don't want it. Like unless you have like a unique game that just hits their check marks, that they don't have like a game like that already. It feels like they're just so resistant to letting anyone go in the store, and like it took Smash Drums like the better part of a year to get on there, and it's like it's so hard because a year from now, are you still even working on this project if it hasn't made you money? Right now, you guys have a 4.4 out of 5-star rating on the Oculus Store. Do you think part of that is Oculus Quest 1 users that are having technical issues with frame rate and things like that? Or how do you feel about that whole review system in terms of the one headset versus the other headset and getting to that point?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think from like a review standpoint, that's been the thing is that, the players that have been able to like access the game and play it, like we've gotten great reception, just like across the board, especially from people that, are fans of puzzle games and escape room games. And, like that's kind of been the thing, is like, we specifically going into this, we were like, well, we definitely, we know that people that like games like The Room, that like games like Myst, that like games like I Expect You to Die, like we know that they're going to like this kind of thing. And, people have really responded to just like the atmosphere and the theme. And, we poured a lot of resources into developing a great soundtrack to just like really add to the immersion and all that. And yeah, it's tough to get people who have played, those games and who really enjoyed those games to even kind of like acknowledge, see this one. And kind of like the exposure is always just kind of difficult, not to go back to that and harp on that too much.
To your point, to your question though, I think, we have one 2-star review. We have a bunch of 4-star reviews that came out like the first week. And I think as we have pushed a few hot fixes that did change a few things. I think our reviews lately have actually been more in the 4.7, like 4.67 range. And so I do think over time, if we can drive more traffic there, I do think that will prove out, over time, to get that up. I do think there's a bit of a thing where, and people have almost said this in their reviews, that because it's on App Lab, it's almost like it's okay to rate it lower, because they're like, well, it must be unfinished, so that could be a bit of a confirmation bias. But I think, all we can do is market the game. All we can do is try and get more 5-star reviews and try to get it there. We're sort of in that vicious cycle though. And I think a lot of developers are probably in that position where, unless you are a main store game, it's very hard to make money. I think that, because, unless it's completely homebrew of just 2 people making a game at home, and it's really just sweat equity, because unless you actually can make those changes, and it might be, if Meta came out and said, hey guys, because this is usually how, when we do other things for other clients or other people, if Meta came out and said, look, we would put it on the main store if it had if it had language support, if it had this, if it had, other support, if it did X, Y, and Z, we could do that if it was very like an ipso facto kind of situation. But because there's no transparency on whether it's the amount of reviews, the amount of plays, the amount of accessibility, since we have no idea, like we can't really just sink time and money into guessing.
It's funny that you mentioned that about the reviews, because I read all of your reviews and there were so many that was like, this game has amazing music. The lighting effects when areas light up are great. It's really immersive and creepy. Really loved it. 4 stars. And I was like, why are so many people 4-starring this game when they give this rave review about it? I really enjoyed the music, the soundtrack. It was so immersive. Like, it kept drawing me in. And you mentioned earlier that you'd run a horror film studio, and I felt like, okay, now it kind of makes sense. Was there anything from the horror side that you really brought into this? Because you created such an atmosphere. What did you bring over from that you had learned before from that?
I don't know, hide the shark. I don't know. It's I think there's so many in VR. I don't know. I think we wanted to do more jump scare things. We wanted to do more certain things. We also knew we wanted to avoid animation and different things that would be extremely resource and time intensive. So I think like the main thing that we did was just create super creepy atmosphere, whether you see silhouettes of mannequins or other things. Like there's things that you see that you're just like, I don't want to go down that room. And you almost like psych the player out more than if you are constantly seeing scary stuff. So it's more of an atmosphere. People continuously say that they feel like they're being watched the entire time they're in the theater. So I don't know, guys. What do you think about that?
Yeah. It's like using just a lot of like really simple kind of cinematic tricks, like the lighting, obscuring a lot of things in shadow. Since we didn't have the resources to do really complex animation, certain things like picking up a script page and them reading it and it implying that they are being watched and starting to kind of like plant those seeds in your head. Like it all kind of contributes to the experience. And yeah, it's so funny watching streamers play the game, because there's like a certain point, and like, trying to avoid spoilers here, where you do like uncover this kind of like secret area, which is kind of like has to do with the projector, and it's this kind of like, kind of screws with your mind kind of moment. And every time they like unveil that new area, they always like hesitate at that moment, and they're always just like, oh, I'm not going down there, like no way. And then like 30 seconds later, of course, they're like slowly walking through. And yeah, a lot of it was, from film experience too. Sound is everything. So we did pour a lot of resources into, when things are getting intense, we, kind of subtly kick in a lot of like really like low frequency kind of creepy sounds to start, kind of putting you on edge a little bit. We put a lot of effort too into just the overall design work. So as you go around the theater, like everything from like the candy bars to just like soda labels to film posters and kind of everything in between. We brought on this really great illustrator, Ronnie Centeno, who like really specializes in just like product design of that era. So like every direction you look, there's just like kind of subconscious like callbacks to that era to just really make you feel immersed. So yeah, I think like from the film side, it's an eye for detail, and it's just trying to kind of get the most that you can out of the limited resources you have.
I was on edge the whole time.
Well, I think especially at the starting when you're doing that first puzzle thing and the whole area is all dark outside of that, the candy and whatever thing, and you can see the eyes and faintly in the background, and and then there's the atmospheric sounds you hear. Is that someone breathing? Is that is that something rustling? Is always that sort of sense of mystery in that sense.
Yeah.
But I was kind of curious though, with your studio, do you have any previous or future projects you wanted to tell us about? I know you mentioned some of the things, but I don't know if you're working on a new game or what your plan is going forward.
Yeah, one thing we're working on, obviously, we want to expand Atlas. We want to keep putting it on different platforms, and we're actually looking into looking into PSVR 2 and some other stuff. We just want to get it out there as much as possible. One project, even though Nathan is in Houston, Eric is in LA, I'm primarily based in New Orleans, where a lot of the team is. And so we are working on this recreation of the French Quarter in VR, and not quite the Saints and Sinners version, but sort of a like one-to-one model of the French Quarter. And so there's sort of like a scavenger hunt. It's not like completely history based, but it's sort of a scavenger hunt arcade type puzzle game that takes place in a one-to-one model of the French Quarter, where you can explore different stuff. And then you're sort of picking up scavenger items from each building, and that relates to a moment in history, but also relates to someone who lived at that building over time. And a cool effect that's actually based a little bit on something in Atlas, where you put something up to your face that changes perspective. But Nathan, on Friday, even you're perfecting a system where you can effectively time travel throughout different eras by holding different things up to your face. So I don't know. We're going to put out maybe a first commercial version of that in about 2 months. That's like early access. That's kind of just messing around. And I think that'll probably be on Steam only to start. It might be on Quest, depending on a few things, but that's something that we're working on, is sort of it's a scavenger hunt sort of puzzler rather than an escape room. It's more of like an exploration. Each building has a certain kind of arcade aspect to it. So I don't know, Nathan, if you want to talk about some of the time traveling stuff you were doing the other day.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing about this one, and which is one thing he mentioned about not sure if it's going to be on Quest, is that it's beautiful. Like it is. It's
not that Atlas isn't. I'm just saying.
Yeah, Atlas is great, but we're doing like a whole block right now that we currently have built, with all these buildings, with all this detail. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the French Quarter. They have some amazing designs on their buildings, and we have like an interior of one of the buildings made, and you can go inside and like he mentioned with the time travel, put up these different objects to your face, and you kind of see the environment as it was in 1920, as it was in 1860. And it's just so seamless. Like you're just time traveling very quickly. And so the reason we don't know if it's going to be on Quest is because it's just so much in it that, we could put it on Quest. It'd be a lesser experience than on PC. So we're kind of still touching on that, whether, it's going to be on that. But, we're definitely excited to show that off, just for the pure art aspect of it, as well as some of the fun gameplay elements we're going to do. And we have a lot of ideas of fun little, like you mentioned, kind of arcadey things you might be able to do in the game. They're just fun, you know?
Yeah,
it's the same kind of open map thing. It's like, you know, it's like with Atlas, we make it hard on ourselves because it's not level by level. But like, you know, you're in this block and you can teleport to any balcony. You can really like see, and it's a one-to-one recreation. So, you know, I've actually been to some of the balconies and I've actually looked down the block at different times of day and it looks exactly the same. It's cleaner. The real French Quarter is dirtier. So we're trying to get that together. But it is cool just to explore and be able to look and really create sort of a digital twin and then play sort of fun games in it. But sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to say, you also asked about the horror studio, and yeah, it's another kind of thing that's on the horizon now. Is we are producing kind of original horror films through this other venture, and one of the things that we really want to do is, you know, kind of utilizing Dan's company and this kind of overarching partnership that we've put together between the studio and Top Right Corner to be able to produce like VR and AR experiences that tie into some of these horror films that we're making. So that's something that we're, you know, it kind of stems from the Belko days a little bit, and just seeing kind of the popularity of this, you know, VR tie-in kind of taking off. And, you know, it's funny because some people say like, oh, like I watched, you know, Belko experiment and then I played the game. And some people say like I played the game and that, like, you know, then watched Belko experiment. So there's kind of this like cool kind of universe that came out of that. So yeah, that's what we're excited to do is kind of bring this partnership to fruition, and you know, some of these titles be able to like not just create like a promotional experience for it, but really like expand the world of these movies that we're creating in VR and AR.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, video game adaptations back vice versa, right? So movies that are based on video games and video games that are based on movies, I think have gotten a bad rap over history for different reasons. And I think, you know, for us, it's about like, it just has to make sense. And when we made Belko, that movie is sort of a battle royale in an office where like everyone has to like kill their coworkers to survive. And it's like this like dark satire horror comedy. And so an escape room where you have to get out of a room in 15 minutes or your head explodes, like that is very on brand for that movie. And I think that's why the game worked, is because it sold the concept of the movie in a native format to VR that people liked. And so I think as we think about doing different movies or whatever and games, it's very much how can we bring something, maybe it's survivor horror or maybe it's multiplayer. We want to bring some of those things. You know, there could even be an Atlas port where we bring an element from a different movie into Atlas as a DLC because we own it, right? So it's a thing where there could be ways of bringing stuff we've already done seamlessly into other projects. And so I think we just want to we love VR and we love everything about it. So we will continue to create content and bring stuff from Welcome Villain, which is our horror film company, into other Top Right Corner projects. Without sort of a cheesy shared multiverse.
Those are some really cool ideas you have, and I'm very excited to see the future of where this continues to go. I want to say a huge thank you for all of you coming on today. You've been an absolute pleasure to have here. For all of our listeners out there, viewers, if you're interested, the game is currently $14.99 for the Atlas Mystery, and it is on the Oculus Quest App Lab. And as you've heard, it's very hard to find, so we will leave links in descriptions, show notes, and everything. But thanks to their generosity, we also have an extra copy or two that we'll be giving away on our Discord after this episode airs. So if you want to, and you haven't yet, join the Discord, come hang out, and you can possibly win a copy of this game. But just one more time, I wanted to say, Dan, Nathan, Eric, thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. We had a really fun time.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. That was great to talk.
Yeah,
thank you. Play the game too. The game was awesome.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, and like obviously we're shilling for it, but obviously, you know, at the end of the day, like you said, maybe it's the 200 5-star reviews and whatever we got to do, you know, to get us to get us there. Because I think as VR developers, you know, we want to sink more time and money into making stuff, and I think you know, whatever we can do to get the game out there.
Definitely. We'll see if we can help.
If you play the game and you like the game, make sure to give it a 5-star review so it can get the Oculus store.
Don't give them a glowing review and then 4-star them right at the end. Come on.
we need that 5. We need that 5-star.
Yes.
So funny.
If you're out there and you're listening, remember, you can stop by the YouTube. You can see all these awesome guys here hanging out with us. You can also comment there and chat with us. Or if you're watching and you want to get more Full Dive, you can take us anywhere. We're on every major podcast platform. You can also rate or review us while you're at it, giving out some 5-star reviews. We would love that. And if you've been out there and you're thinking about VR, you've been listening, you haven't done it yet, just dive on in.